Imagine sleeping in your own home and waking up to find it's not the same anymore. The walls move. The rooms disappear. Doors open to places that should not exist. This is the true nightmare of a woman whose house changed every single night, until the night it changed forever. It was just after midnight when Sara woke up. Her throat felt dry, so she decided to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was silent, too silent. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator wasn't there. As she walked down the short hallway, something already felt wrong. The air was colder than it should be, and the shadows seemed darker than usual. When she stepped into the kitchen, her heart stopped. The kitchen was bigger, much bigger. The counter she always leaned on to reach the fridge was now further away. The fridge itself, it wasn't on the right. It was on the opposite wall, humming softly, but in a place it had never been before. And worse, the door to the backyard, her familiar wooden door with the glass panel, was gone. In its place was just a plain wall. Sara froze. She tried to tell herself she was half asleep, maybe dreaming. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and counted to 3. But when she opened them, the kitchen was still wrong. Her bare feet felt the cold tiles under her as she stepped forward slowly. Every movement felt heavy, as if the air itself didn't want her to be there. She reached out to touch the wall where the door should be. The surface was smooth, warm, almost like it was alive. A faint sound came from somewhere behind her, like a quick, sharp knock on wood. She spun around, but the sound stopped instantly. Nothing moved. Sara grabbed a glass from the shelf and poured herself some water, trying to act normal. But as she drank, she could feel her heart racing. She backed away from the fridge, glancing at the wall again. When she woke the next morning, everything was back to normal. The fridge was in its usual place. The backyard door was there, sunlight spilling through the glass. But Sara didn't feel relieved. She felt watched. The second night, Sara stayed awake longer than usual. She wanted to convince herself that what happened in the kitchen was just her imagination. But deep down she knew it wasn't. Around 1 a.m., she sat on her bed scrolling through her phone when she noticed something strange. The pale glow from the streetlight outside wasn't shining through her curtains like it normally did. The room felt darker, too dark. Frowning, she got up and pulled the curtains aside. Her breath caught in her throat. The window was gone. In its place was a perfectly solid wall. Smooth. Freshly painted. Not a single sign that glass or a frame had ever been there. Sara stepped closer, her fingers trembling as she touched the wall. It was warm, just like the kitchen wall the night before. She pressed her ear against it, and for a second she thought she heard something. Soft scratching, like fingernails dragging slowly from the other side. Her heart started pounding. She stepped back, looking around the room. Everything else looked normal. Her bed, her dresser, the lamp. But the missing window made her feel trapped. She turned to leave the room, but the moment her hand touched the doorknob, a faint smell hit her. Damp earth. Like wet soil after rain. The scent grew stronger until she almost gagged. Sara backed away from the door and sat on her bed, pulling her blanket tightly around her. The smell slowly faded, but the heavy silence remained. She kept her eyes on the wall where the window used to be, afraid it might change again if she looked away. Somehow, she fell asleep, her dreams filled with dark, narrow spaces and the sound of dirt being shoveled. When she woke up in the morning, the window was back. The sunlight poured in, and the street outside looked the same as always. But Sara couldn't shake the feeling that something was trying to close her house in one wall at a time. On the third night, Sara decided to stay in the living room. She thought if she kept the lights on and stayed awake, nothing strange would happen. She made herself some tea and curled up on the couch, watching the clock tick past midnight. The house was quiet, but the kind of quiet that feels like something is listening. At exactly 12:47 a.m., she noticed it. There, in the corner of her living room, was a staircase. Sara froze, her mug halfway to her lips. She didn't have stairs. Her house was a single floor. Yet now, an old wooden staircase stood where her bookshelf should have been. The wood looked aged, almost black, and the steps led upward into complete darkness. Noraling. No sound. Just waiting. Her mouth went dry. She blinked, hoping it would disappear, but it stayed. Slowly, she stood and took a step closer. The air near the stairs was cold, far colder than the rest of the room. She craned her neck to see the top, but it was impossible. It was like the darkness swallowed the upper steps. Then she heard it, soft, slow creaking, like footsteps, coming down. Sara's heart raced. Her legs felt heavy, as if they were made of stone. She wanted to run, but her body refused to move. The creaking stopped halfway down. Silence. The darkness at the top seemed to grow thicker, almost reaching toward her. Finally, she found the strength to take a step back. Then another. She didn't take her eyes off the stairs as she backed all the way to her bedroom, slamming the door shut. She locked it, though she had no idea if that would help. When morning came, she walked into the living room cautiously. The bookshelf was back. The stairs were gone, but the air in that corner still felt cold. By the fourth night, Sara was afraid to fall asleep. She sat in the living room with every light on, trying to distract herself with TV. But the feeling of being watched never left. Around 1:15 a.m., the TV screen flickered. For a second, she thought it was just bad reception. Then she noticed something worse. The photos on the wall were different. Sara's living room was lined with framed pictures, her parents, her friends, childhood memories. But now every photo had changed. In each one, the people were standing in front of a house she didn't recognize. It wasn't her house, or anyone's she had ever visited. It was a tall, narrow building, gray and decaying, with dark windows like empty eyes. Some of the people in the pictures weren't even her family. Their faces were pale, their eyes blurry, as if they had been moving when the photo was taken. In one frame, a woman she'd never seen before was standing with her arm around Sara's shoulders, smiling, but her teeth were too sharp. Sara's stomach churned. She stepped closer to one frame, her breath fogging the glass. She reached out to touch it, and the moment her fingers brushed the frame, she felt it cold. Icy cold, like it had been outside in freezing weather. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, she heard a faint dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Her eyes darted to the hallway. It was empty, but the sound was getting closer. Slowly, Sara grabbed her phone, ready to call someone, but when she looked back at the wall, the pictures were normal again. Her family, her friends. No strange house. No strangers. The dragging sound stopped. She stood frozen for several minutes before daring to move. But deep down, she knew someone or something was trying to change more than just her house. Sara avoided looking at the corners of her house now. Every night brought something new, something wrong. On the fifth night, she woke up needing to use the bathroom. She stepped out of her bedroom into the hallway, but it didn't look right. Her hallway was always short, just a few steps to the bathroom door. But now it stretched far ahead, disappearing into shadow. The floorboards creaked under her bare feet as she took a step forward. The further she walked, the more the walls seemed to close in, just slightly. The light from her bedroom faded behind her, and the air grew heavy, like the hallway didn't want her to breathe. She kept walking. The bathroom door should have been right there. But it wasn't. Just more hallway. Then she heard it, footsteps. Not ahead of her, but behind her. Slow, careful, matching her pace exactly. When she stopped, they stopped. When she took another step, they followed. Sara's skin prickled. She didn't dare turn around. Her body screamed at her to run, but her legs felt stiff, as if something was pulling at her from behind. Her breathing grew shaky. The hallway seemed even longer now, the shadows darker. She whispered to herself, "This isn't real, this isn't real." Finally, she saw a door ahead. Relief washed over her, until she realized it wasn't her bathroom door. It was old wooden, and covered in peeling black paint. A faint whisper came from behind it, too quiet to understand. She reached for the doorknob, cold, wet metal, and then blinked. She was back in her normal hallway. The bathroom door was in front of her. Everything was quiet. Sara stood there, shaking, her hand still hovering in the air. She didn't open the bathroom door. She just went back to bed, pulling the covers over her head. She didn't want to know what was behind that black door. Sara told herself she wouldn't get out of bed that night. She thought if she stayed under the covers until morning, maybe the house wouldn't change again. But sometime after midnight, she heard it. A voice. Faint, low, and rough, like someone whispering through a crack in the wall. It was saying her name. Slowly, drawing out each syllable. She froze, her eyes wide in the dark. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But then it came again. Louder. It was coming from the bathroom. Sara sat up, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The voice didn't sound like anyone she knew. It wasn't urgent, it was calm, almost inviting. She slid her feet to the floor, every muscle tense, and stepped into the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. The whispering stopped the moment she got close. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then 3 slow knocks from inside the bathroom. Sara's breath caught in her throat. She reached for the doorknob without meaning to, her hand moving on its own. When her fingers touched it, she expected cold metal. But it was warm. Almost hot. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. The bathroom was gone. In its place was a narrow tunnel, stretching into darkness. The walls were damp, covered in something that glistened in the dim light. The smell of wet earth hit her instantly, making her gag. From deep inside the tunnel, the voice spoke again. This time in a language she didn't understand. It was softer now, but closer. Sara slammed the door shut. She backed away until her shoulders hit the wall, then ran to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When morning came, the bathroom was back, as if nothing had happened. But she could still hear that voice in her head. By the 7th night, Sara had stopped pretending this was just her imagination. The house was changing. Watching. Waiting. She sat in the living room with every light on, hugging a pillow, trying not to blink too much. That's when she noticed it. The wall opposite her moved. At first, she thought it was her eyes playing tricks. But no. She could see the wallpaper rippling, like a slow wave passing under the surface. The motion was subtle, but steady, like the wall was breathing. Sara's mouth went dry. She stood and took a cautious step closer. The air around the wall felt warmer than the rest of the room. Then, shapes began pressing outward from beneath the wallpaper. Faint outlines of hands, fingers stretching and curling. Several things, were inside the wall. She backed away, her pulse racing, but she couldn't look away. The shapes moved along the wall, dragging themselves toward the corner of the room, as if they were trying to find a way out. Then from somewhere inside the wall, she heard a muffled sound. Not words. Not exactly. It was like whispers layered over whispers, dozens of voices speaking at once, too fast to understand. The hands pressed harder, and for a moment she thought the wallpaper might tear. Sara's knees felt weak. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table. The whispering grew louder, then stopped all at once. The wall went still. Completely still. She stood frozen for a long moment, afraid to breathe. Finally, she grabbed her phone and backed toward her bedroom, never turning her back on the wall. By morning, the wall looked normal again, smooth, still harmless. But Sara knew the truth. The house wasn't just changing. It was alive. Sara had reached her limit. Every night, the house twisted into something strange, dangerous, and impossible. She decided she wouldn't wait for it to change again. She'd leave before midnight. She packed a small bag, grabbed her car keys, and went to the front door. Her hands were shaking, but she told herself once she stepped outside, she'd be free. She turned the knob and pulled the door open. But it didn't lead outside. Instead of her familiar front porch and quiet street, there was another house. It was dim inside, the air thick with dust. The floorboards were warped and cracked, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. There were no windows, just long, shadowy hallways stretching in every direction. The smell hit her immediately: old wood, damp rot, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Sara's heart thudded in her chest. She took a step back, but the air behind her felt cold, pushing her forward. Somewhere deep in the strange house, a floorboard creaked. Then another. Slow, heavy footsteps began moving toward the door. She slammed it shut and locked it, her breath coming fast. She pressed her ear against the wood, listening. Silence. After a long minute, she turned the lock and slowly opened the door again. This time, her own porch was there, bathed in the pale light of the street lamp. Sara shut the door quickly and stepped away from it, her back against the wall. The thought hit her hard. Her house wasn't just changing inside. It was opening doors to somewhere else. Somewhere that wanted her to step through. Sara told herself she wouldn't touch the front door again. But that night, she made the mistake of looking out her bedroom window. The familiar glow of the streetlight was gone. So were the houses across the road. The entire street had vanished. In its place stretched an endless forest, black and silent. The trees were tall, twisted things with no leaves, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. A faint mist curled around their bases, drifting slowly toward her house. Sara's stomach tightened. She pressed her forehead to the glass, trying to make sense of it, but then she saw them. Figures. Dozens of pale, thin figures standing between the trees. They weren't moving, but every single one was facing her house. Their faces were hard to see in the darkness, but their heads tilted slightly, as if listening. She took a step back from the window, her breathing shallow. The figures didn't move. They didn't blink. They just watched. Then, as if sensing her retreat, one of them slowly lifted an arm and pointed directly at her window. Her heart lurched. She stumbled backward, her heel hitting the side of her bed. She pulled the curtains shut, hands shaking, but even with the window covered, she felt their eyes on her. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Then came the sound, soft at first, then louder. Footsteps. Not from inside her house, but from outside, circling. Slow, deliberate steps in the grass, moving around the walls. Sara curled up on her bed, clutching her blanket. She didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly. The footsteps stopped right under her window. She stayed like that until dawn, when the light finally pushed into her room. When she checked again, the street was back. Cars, houses, everything normal. But Sara knew those figures were still out there, waiting. Sara didn't sleep the following night. She sat on her bed, the lights on, her bag still packed, ready to run if she had the chance. But somewhere deep down she knew there wouldn't be a chance. At 3:02 a.m. it began. The air in her room grew heavy, pressing down on her chest. The walls around her shuddered, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. Her lamp flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. When her eyes adjusted, she realized she was no longer in her bedroom. Her bed now sat in the middle of a vast, empty field. The grass was black and brittle, crunching softly in the faint wind. Above her, the sky was a deep, endless red, with no stars, only a dim, shifting glow like distant fire. Her house was gone. She climbed off the bed, her bare feet touching the cold ground. The field stretched forever in all directions. But then she heard it, whispering. It was everywhere. All around her. The voices were low, overlapping, speaking words she couldn't understand. Shapes began to form in the distance. Dozens of them. Pale, human-like figures, slowly emerging from the red haze. They moved with a strange, jerking motion, their heads tilted at impossible angles. The whispers grew louder. Closer. Sara backed away, but the bed was gone too, vanished without a trace. The ground beneath her feet began to pulse, like something alive was moving just under the surface. One of the figures stepped closer, its face smooth and featureless. It stopped just a few feet away. And then, in a voice that was not its own, it whispered her name. The others joined in. until the entire field echoed with the sound of Sara. Sara. The red sky darkened. The ground split open beneath her. She fell. And the house never changed again, because there was nothing left to change.